So let's start the round of Q&A, but I just want to highlight how much this resonates with our work, or at least our plans on agriculture empowered by supercomputing and listen to the land. So I have questions, but it's not me to ask. Any on? Yes, Eric.
Thank you for your talk. My question is around how do you ensure that the applications that are put out, either for visualization or presentation on the public, are actually validated before people can actually rely on what the models are showing or what the data is showing for critical decision making, particularly in something like fire. You will think that whatever is put out there is actually an accurate reflection of what is truly expected and not just an AI hallucination, for example. Is there, I guess, a human in the loop anywhere that we need to put in place? And how do you transition from just the purely exploratory work to the public good, productionized side of things?
That's a great question, and I hoped I was asked, because that's really what's here, right? If you know, and I'm saying that's why one problem at a time, right? If you understand throughout those cross-sector stakeholders, what's the problem to solve? That one problem that requires deep integration, right? And how do we then build a minimum viable product together? You're sort of innovating together. It's a form of co-design, co-production that's very specialized to solving one challenge and integration of science and technology. And then this part becomes the tool to solve what you just asked, because we don't directly deploy, but we evaluate and deploy within demo networks, right? It's not just like mindless deployment of it, but you're slowly creating these pilot programs that help us. FireMap, for instance, is a scalable. It's used for every fire for the last 7 years. But before that, it took a moment. Right? We worked with local fire departments first and local industry to bring that aircraft. We have actually a whole $30 million California program that prepays an aircraft to bring data to that digital twin in terms of the fire's growth and multimodal data from LiDARs to SAR to thermal to other things. We do this for now multi-hazards. So you're both evaluating, not just if this is an effective, validated model that we can deploy, but you're also evaluating what do they understand from what you're showing them. Like uncertainty is not a great word. Society doesn't know what that means. If it's uncertain, it's wrong. Instead of that, like we had to build a whole communication scheme about, for this model, we are confident because we know where the ignition point of the fire is. We know like the weather at a detail that we can be a lot more confident. So instead of saying 80% uncertain, for instance, like that's not how we communicate it anyway, but we say low, medium, high, the confidence level, because you need that fast decision and confidence in your decision based on what the model is doing. We also say, this is a model without fire suppression. So this is actually wrong by communication. We say that this is the best of our knowledge right now. And as we learn more about what we don't know, but we had to sort of really create this together with the fire chiefs that we are working to deploy and make those decisions based on these maps that they are receiving. Similarly, for Burn Pro 3D, we work right now in a demo network at the burn unit scale. So we have multiple, like some tens of sites across the United States that we show how those burns are using this approach. And we are also measuring, like through sensing and aircraft drones, so we can validate and see how well it worked. So it takes a while, but without such an effort, it will never get there, because we are trying to transform how burns are implemented here. Yeah.
I want to follow up on what Eric asked. When the moment that you mentioned composable systems, I immediately thought cybersecurity. And not even thinking in terms of this, just in a system that we are putting together with so diverse sources of information. And, well, I just think like a sysadmin from, I don't know, primary school or high school or whatever. Everyone brings devices. What do? You decide that the less secure is your basic point, which is not very good when you are trying to deal with emergencies. So is there a standard, is there an approach, is there is different, does AI be the answer? I mean, is AI trained to decide this is safe enough, this is very safe, this is more than safe? What's the outcome?
Yeah, excellent question. And a part of it is, what is the security on? Right? There are basics that need to be still solved across these systems when we talk about composable systems. Federated identity is still a challenge between different systems, and I think we are collectively making efforts to solve those as a community. But also, the securing things it's very context-driven, right? If the security is on the data, you can actually sort of create a firewall that data is behind a compliant ecosystem, and you can create services. That's why I say service-driven capability that exposes just what can be exposed under a governance structure about that data to the outside world. So service becomes the interface to the data. You don't have direct access to the data. So this applies, for instance, health data settings. You can go multiple data systems before that would even be in that AI-ready ecosystem, because also doing a time series analysis and doing a AI sort of object system, those are like two different database structures. Like storage of it is even, and the models of how to bring the data together changes. So moving data under a governance structure through those systems becomes a challenge. Again, when you're solving one problem at a time, those become more solvable instead of solving for the general. And then from that, let's focus on the lessons learned, and we assess the needs of similar problems. We turn those into patterns that we can then generalize and apply through that platform. But cybersecurity is a whole different challenge, right? Then if the security is on the AI, this is adversarial. How do you deploy then things next to it that continuously evaluate and judge that before you turn that into a service that you can deploy within a solution? So we need to really look at what's the security on, how do we govern that digital asset? It's not just data, it's all digital assets in that case. And what are the governance requirements for those?
And the liability.
Yeah, and scalability and sustainability. There's like all the abilities needs to be coming in place.
Jeff.
Okay, I have two questions, I guess. A national data platform, I don't want you to talk too much about the competition. Is there other competition across the country, or have you lined up your partners and gotten far enough out front here that this is the established bit? And the other one, what about an international data platform? Is it realistic to think about this extending out, or is that too crazy?
Again, there are what's technically possible, there are the realities of the world. Let me answer the first one. It would be really sort of unrealistic even to say this is the only one. But we really think the National Data Platform right now presents a model that didn't exist before. That's why we built it. It's a federation system that tries to be without resources for the most part, other than some transient resources, right? And some connector nodes, and like there's a whole, and there are things I can say, there are things I can't say in the form of proposals, but we found a model to scale it at the national level in the US, and we are pretty confident about it. And that really about, lessons learned from the current NDP and what's needed, right? For instance, we really need it can't be computation or platform-less, resourceless, right? It needs to have some of those to connect things. Or federated identity, how that can happen between the Slurm and Kubernetes itself. Like these are some of those lessons learned. And these customization for different groups, and how would that happen? Or how would the endpoint stack could be, like the platform stack could be implemented so others can develop into it. These are lessons learned that we are building around scale of it. And at the global scale, I think there's actually the backdrop that it started with. We built something that's Kubernetes-based in the US called the National Research Platform. That's really the cloud of those resources that are managed, and you bring your own resources, and there's an expansion model. So this is a very similar one for the upper layer of that, to make it more usable, that model. And you might know there's a global research platform on that. So the model, in that sense, could enable international collaboration or interagency collaboration within the US. But there's also the realities in terms of politics and boundaries and borders. And so that's to be developed. I hope we can. Right? And since this is so expandable as a model, it doesn't have to be one size fits all. But the thing to learn from it is I think we need to learn to federate and collaborate around problems. And we need to make our systems work for those in their best ability through services.
Anna?
So the way that I would see this is more of a multi-layer approach, kind of like a GitHub approach for data. If projects want to keep it private between just the members of the project, they should be able to do that. Then you can make it public to the national level, maybe international. And I would even have the same way that GitHub tracks changes. I would track changes of how they annotate data, scientists, so that you can keep track of who decided to use this data for what. So I think it has huge potential.
Yeah, there's the provenance part of it, I know you're thinking, which is, governance together with how are you actually ensuring and reporting that governance to the right people. You saw yesterday from Manish that context, for instance, of use, and how do you actually sort of use AI-driven approaches to bring that context into it, context on the source, right? That we can bring into this, like the whole lineage becomes a part of it. And I think for the rest of your question, I'm gonna say yes, right? Because again, when there's a will, there's a way. I think if we create a model and we collectively believe to work toward it, which is really why I'm calling this societal computing and innovation. It's a model that can be applied to these different contexts. I think we'll get there, and we'll get there in our own way, with our own priorities, in a sovereign, science sovereignty way.
Join me in saying thank you to Ilkay for the fantastic talk.